My name is Robert Williams. I'm 28 and work in the food and beverage industry. Although I say that, I'm not on-site staff. I go to the office and work in sales promotion. Our department's job is to come up with plans to increase store sales and negotiate with clients. I joined this company right after high school and have been in this department for 10 years now. Most of my peers were college graduates, so it was tough not to fall behind every day with my shallow knowledge. But now, I have many individual tasks and no longer feel inferior. I think I can be trusted to work independently. I always arrive at the company 30 minutes early to start work smoothly. I check today's tasks and sort out the documents that arrive while I was away, placing them on the responsible staff members' desks. This has become my morning routine. Most people arrive about 10 minutes before starting time, so I try to finish these tasks by then. Morning, Robert. Thanks as always, my supervisor and colleague Liam often say to me. But since I'm just trying not to inconvenience myself, I feel a little embarrassed when they thank me. Then my boss, Owen Smith, arrives. Owen is a supervisor 10 years my senior who transferred from another department last year. We've often been paired together since I've been in the sales promotion department longer, but his mood changes depending on the person, and he's not well liked. "Hey, go make coffee," he says grumpily. "Good morning." The usual coffee is okay, right? "I'll go make it." I respond lightly and head to the break room. "Robert, you really can do it without making a nasty face," says Liam, who joins me in the break room. "He's always like that," I reply. "But yesterday, after your proposal was accepted, he dumped a massive amount of miscellaneous tasks on you to finish today. The harassment is terrible," Liam says. "Was that harassment? I thought he was busy and asked me to do it," I answer. Liam laughs and says, "You're really knave." Owen is waiting for his coffee. "Yeah, just put it there," he says curtly, not looking up from his computer screen. Liam sends me a wry smile, but it's just the usual Owen, so I don't mind. I start my work without concern. When Owen first transferred here, he was more approachable, asking for help with the promotion department's work. But after I received praise for summarizing a document that was well received by the big bosses, his attitude towards me changed. He started dumping work on me, saying things like, "I'll give you this little job," or "Why are you the only one getting praised? You don't have much of a head on your shoulders." Even directly expressing his disdain, it's clear that he doesn't feel good about me. If we're working together, though, it's not like let sleeping dogs lie. We are often paired, so all I can do is go with the flow and get along with him. As for work, I'm enjoying it every day, except for having a troublesome boss. The crowded train to and from work is a bit tiring, but it's unavoidable in the city. Then, one evening after work, I was standing near the door on a crowded train. A black-haired woman was standing diagonally in front of me. It was clear that she wasn't American. What country is she from? What a beautiful hair color. I was thinking about that and standing blankly when I noticed that she was swaying in a way different from the train's shaking. She was pressing the temple area with her left hand and looking down, but her face was pale when she looked up slightly. "Is she okay?" I worried and glanced over, clearly noticing that her complexion was getting worse. "Are you all right?" When I asked, she nodded slightly, but she looked like she might collapse at any moment. "Excuse me for a moment," I asked the person next to her to switch places. "Hold on if you need to. Let's get off at the next station." The person is a woman, so I'm worried about offending her. But before I know it, I've taken action. When we arrived at the station, I supported the woman as we got off the train. She really looked like she was struggling to stand. She was weak, but to keep from falling, she clung tightly to me as we walked to a bench. Kind strangers called for a station attendant, offered a bottle of water, and even draped a jacket over the woman. A station attendant who heard the commotion came over to the woman saying, "Let's go to the medical room. Can you walk?" "I'll support you," I said to the woman. But watching her reaction, I suddenly realized something. Huh? Does she understand me? Thinking this, I asked in English, "Do you understand me? Do you speak English?" "I speak a little English," she replied immediately in English. "Let's go to the medical room together." When I said this in English, she got up, holding on to me. Just then, another station attendant arrived with a wheelchair, and we headed to the medical room together. But once she laid down on the bed, her face was still pale, her hands were cold, and she seemed to be getting worse. The station attendants suggested calling an ambulance. I spoke to the anxious woman. "I can interpret. Shall we go together?" When I asked, she said, "Thank you, please. I just arrived in America and don't understand the language yet," gripping my hand. An ambulance arrived quickly, and I went to the hospital to interpret. Fortunately, it seemed that stress and anemia were the cause, and she recovered after receiving an IV drip and was allowed to go home. "Thank you so much. I was really saved thanks to you." Her name is Amelia. Seeing her smile, I felt relieved. "No problem. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad I could help you. By the way, Amelia, I thought you might be from Europe based on your accent. Where are you from?" "Germany." I burst into laughter when I heard that Amelia is from Germany. Oh, I'm sorry for laughing. I should have asked you right away. Your language would have been easier to understand. When I replied in German, Amelia exclaimed, "Wow, you understand German." I'm shocked and laughed. "Oh, by the way, Amelia, I'll take you home since I'm worried. Let's take a taxi together." "Thank you so much. I'll take you up on that." And I decided to take her home. In the car, we introduced ourselves briefly and exchanged business cards. "I was really saved because you were there. Let me thank you properly next time." I declined at first, but she insisted, so we made plans for a meal. During the conversation, we both stared at the business cards at the same time, and Amelia spoke first. "You work in the food and beverage industry. Wait, Amelia, your company is that major one." We talked about each other's companies, and by the time we arrived at Amelia's apartment building, the conversation deepened. "Let's talk more over dinner. I'll get in touch once I find a free day." "Sure, see you next time then." With those words, we parted for the day, and I headed home. Days later, Amelia and I had dinner, and the conversation naturally turned to work. The more we talked, the deeper the conversation got. The reason it gets so deep into work is that Amelia works to spread German beer in America, and I work in the food and beverage industry. I had no choice but to jump on. I've expressed all my thoughts. "I really want to do business with your company. What do you think?" Of course, I was not able to decide this on my own, but the more we talked, the more ideas came to mind, and I believed that if we teamed up, it would be beneficial for both sides. I told Amelia that I would take it back to the company and respond. The next day, I reported my conversation with Amelia to my supervisor. I briefly explained how I met Amelia and then explained the subject of German beer. My supervisor seemed very impressed and said, "Sounds good, Robert. Give it a try." I conveyed this to Amelia and further discussed it, prepared documents, and submitted them. Soon, instructions came from the higher-ups to proceed, as it was a rather big deal. The company united to ensure the deal was successful, and a project team was formed. Since I had been advancing the discussion with Amelia, I was appointed as a team leader. This was my first time leading such a large deal, but with the support of my boss and colleagues, I began the exchange with Amelia. However, something unexpected happened midway. In the midst of the company's excitement about this large deal, there was only one person who was dissatisfied. It was my boss, Owen. "How far have you come? Are you really up to this? You can't handle such a big deal with just a high school diploma. Lend me a graduate from a national university. I'll take over as leader. Give it to me," he said. He then took the documents from my hand and went straight to the supervisor to negotiate. The supervisor and Owen spent quite some time talking in another room. When the supervisor returned to the department, he seemed a bit worn out. "I'll take care of it, so be prepared," Owen told me cheerfully, and then headed off to negotiate with Amelia's company. "I'm really sorry, Robert. It was your project after all. Thank you for bringing it this far," the supervisor said, patting me on the shoulder, and went to tell the project team that I had been removed. I never expected to be not only demoted from leader, but also removed from the team. Apparently, the supervisor had no choice but to remove me, as I was the only one who could take over Owen's current job. But in essence, he was talked into it by Owen. Although it was frustrating, I told myself that my abilities were still not enough and focused on my newly assigned work. Then, I heard a story from my colleague Jack, who was on the project team. Owen taking over my work was not only because he disliked me, but also because he had ulterior motives. Come to think of it, Owen loved women from abroad. I had heard that he always went to pubs and bars where women from abroad worked for a drink after work. It's none of my business that Owen is single, but since the leader on the other side of this big deal was a German woman named Amelia, he seemed to have faint hopes of turning their acquaintance into a romantic relationship. Recently, Jack was invited to drink by Owen, and that's what he heard from him. I was dumbfounded by the unexpected reason. Surely he was getting carried away, since it's rare to negotiate with people from abroad. However, I thought that as long as the negotiations were successful, that would be fine. I wondered if they had reached the final stage, since it had been a while since the change in leadership. I had to handle Owen's share of work as well, so my mind was away from the large deal, but I was curious. Just then, Jack happened to walk by, scratching his head. "Hey Jack, how's that project going? Is it almost settled?" Expecting a positive response, I called out cheerfully, but he replied with a rather grim-faced and a soft voice. "Well, about that, apparently the conversation was not progressing very well. There were problems with the negotiation documents and interpretation, as well as Owen's German level. The documents I had prepared were written in German for Amelia to understand, and only the important parts were translated into English for our members to understand. Since all the documents that Owen and the team had seen in the beginning were translated by me into English, Owen seemed to have been troubled when he started as a leader and all the new documents were in German. Of course, there was an interpreter for Amelia from the beginning, but the conversation during the negotiations was conducted almost entirely in English. The interpreter was translating German into English for Owen. The difficult parts that didn't get through were translated into English, but the process of translating along the way was taking too much time. Because of that, things that should have been settled were not, and both Amelia and our higher-ups, who knew the progress, were in a heavy mood. While I was working at my desk, Liam came running over to me looking flustered. "Robert, emergency. Come to the conference room immediately, please." When I asked what had happened, I found out that Amelia was about to throw in the towel. It seems Amelia was worn out from negotiating while translating. "I've had enough of this hassle. Please call Robert. I trust him more than you. When Robert was here, everything went smoothly. Why has he been left out?" Amelia seemed so dissatisfied that she was about to walk out. I hurried to the conference room, entered the room, and said, "Excuse me." Then Amelia's face lit up, though she was angrily speaking German to Owen. "Robert, I've been waiting. I really can't move this conversation forward. What's going on? Is he really your leader? He's totally useless." I apologized for my boss, but Amelia calling him useless was a bit too much. Amelia happily spoke to me in German. I replied in German, and we both chuckled, unsure if it was a joke or serious. Owen and my colleagues were staring with their mouths open. It's natural since they don't understand German, but more importantly, Amelia's mood seemed to have improved now that I, who can speak German, was there. With Robert here, everything will be fine. Let's move on. Robert will be handling this, right? The interpreter translated Amelia's German words to Owen. Owen bit his lip with a bitter face and said, "Only Robert, please," and moved to the seat behind him. Afterward, with me leading the conversation, we quickly reached the final stage. The next time we meet, the deal will surely be sealed. Before I knew it, my manager and other bosses had gathered in the conference room. I was thanked by my colleagues and manager, but then Jack asked, "But why do you speak German so fluently?" The truth is, I've been exposed to German since childhood. My father worked at the German branch office after being transferred to Germany. Now he's back here, but visiting Germany during summer and winter breaks has become a tradition. I naturally became interested in German, able to speak simple phrases. Growing up close to Germany, I wanted to study more, so I went to an international high school with a German language department. I considered moving to Germany after college, but even though my father worked abroad, we weren't a wealthy family. Thinking about the expenses for my siblings, I decided to support myself and, against my parents' wishes, gave up on college and chose to work. Everyone seemed to understand when I explained that really having Robert was a lifesaver. "Thank you." I was thanked again, but my manager turned to Owen, who was looking down at the back. "Owen, how were you going to move the conversation forward without understanding German?" The manager seemed somewhat befuddled. "Well, I heard there was an interpreter," Owen mumbled. "The client only speaks German." "Tell us in advance. We didn't even know the documents were all in German." Owen turned to me. "I told you she was German, so I thought you'd understand." Someone chuckled at that. Upon hearing that, Owen clicked his tongue and left the room, looking frustrated. A few months later, the collaboration between German beer and the restaurant was a huge success. The response was greater than expected. Both Amelia's company and ours made substantial sales in celebration. Today, Amelia and I are dining at a fancy restaurant. We were truly meant to meet. Who would have thought it would lead to this from a chance encounter on a train? We laughed and sipped our wine. We've actually been dating for a while now. After she confessed her feelings to me, I was surprised but had feelings for her too, so we started dating. On the way home from the state, we bumped into Owen, Robert, and Amelia. "What are you two doing?" Amelia's arm whined with mine. Owen was speechless. We're dating now." I was a bit embarrassed, but there was no use hiding it. After reporting this, Owen let out a scream of astonishment. The next day, I found out why Owen had made that noise. "Why are you next to Amelia?" "It should have been me." He came to me first thing in the morning and said that, looking frustrated. After closing a business deal, though he felt embarrassed about giving up midway, Owen, who had fallen head over heels for Amelia, went the extra mile to look up some German phrases. It seems he confessed to her, albeit in broken German. However, it seems he was turned down by Amelia. He even declared he was done with his favorite bar and was preparing to attend German language classes. Owen, who had spectacularly crashed and burned, seems to have returned to being a regular at the bar. Not knowing any of this, I felt a bit guilty, but Owen has stopped being as snarky as before since his defeat. The work environment in our department has improved, and my internal evaluation within the company is on the rise. Thanks to that major project, my personal life is fulfilling as well, and I am living happy days.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, Yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.